I never imagined that one phone call would erase everything I believed about my family. My brother used my name to steal $150,000. When I found out, I told my parents the truth, expecting them to stand by me. Instead, they asked me to forgive him. That was the moment I realized I no longer had a place in their lives. I packed a bag, closed the front door behind me, and never went back. My name is Delaney Hutchins. I am 26 years old, and I now live in a small apartment thousands of miles away from the town where I grew up. It isn't a perfect place, but every corner belongs to me, and every day is peaceful. For the first time in my life, I don't feel like I have to compete for love that was never equally given. Looking back, I can see the signs were always there. My family was built around one person, my older brother, Bennett. Everything seemed to revolve around him. His dreams mattered. His problems mattered. His future mattered. The rest of us simply adjusted around him. My father, Gordon, spent his whole career working as a contractor. He admired Bennett more than anyone else. No matter how many times Bennett's plans failed, Dad always believed the next one would make him successful. Every mistake became another lesson instead of a reason to be careful. My mother, Linda, protected Bennett in a quieter way. She never argued loudly or made dramatic speeches. She simply found a reason why none of his failures were really his fault. If something went wrong, she blamed bad luck, difficult people, or poor timing. Bennett was always the victim in her eyes. I was the complete opposite. I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, paid my own bills, and never expected anyone to rescue me. I thought being responsible would earn respect. Instead, it made me almost invisible. One Sunday evening, we gathered at my parents' house for dinner like we had done for years. The table was full of food, and everyone acted as though life was perfect. My father proudly talked about Bennett's newest business idea. My mother listened with a smile, asking questions, and praising his ambition. No one asked about my job or my plans. My mother only looked at me to refill my water glass and offer me another spoonful of potatoes. When dinner ended, I drove home with a strange feeling I couldn't explain. Everything had looked normal, yet something felt wrong. I didn't know it then, but my life was already beginning to fall apart. When I was younger, I believed every family had one child who needed more attention than the other. I didn't question it because it had always been my normal. The first time I noticed it clearly, I was still in high school. Bennett had crashed his first car only a few months after getting his license. He admitted he had been driving too fast, but no one stayed upset for long. My father spent days helping him find another vehicle. Since Bennett couldn't qualify for a loan, Dad signed the papers with him without hesitation. I remember standing in the kitchen while they celebrated the deal. Dad smiled and said everyone deserved a second chance. A few weeks later, I brought home the highest exam score in my class. My report was left on the counter while everyone talked about Bennett's new car. No one meant to ignore me. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Things stayed the same after Bennett left for college. During his second year, something happened with his tuition. I never learned the full story. Mom only called it a misunderstanding and said the school had made things difficult. She quietly took money from the savings account to fix the problem before anyone outside the family found out. Around that same time, I had started working part-time after classes to pay for my own books and daily expenses. I never asked why the rules were different for us. It seemed easier not to. Whenever friends talked about their parents being unfair, I couldn't relate. My parents weren't cruel. They never shouted at me or treated me badly. They simply expected me to manage on my own while Bennett was always surrounded by help. By the time I reached my final year of college, I had stopped expecting much attention. I studied, worked, and planned my future one step at a time. When graduation finally arrived, I was proud of what I had achieved. I had earned my degree without asking anyone to solve my problems. After the ceremony, our family went out to eat. For a few minutes, everyone congratulated me. Then Bennett answered a phone call. He came back to the table with a huge smile and announced that he had been offered a new job. The whole conversation changed. Dad wanted to know the salary. Mom asked when he would start. They talked about where he might live and how exciting his future looked. My graduation slowly disappeared from the discussion. I sat there smiling while my dinner grew cold. It wasn't the first time something like that had happened, and it wouldn't be the last. I didn't feel angry anymore. I had learned that life at home was easier when I didn't compete for attention that was already promised to someone else. So I became quieter. I celebrated my own victories in private. I solved my own problems without asking for help. I stopped expecting my parents to notice the little milestones that meant everything to me. As I drove home that night after graduation, I looked at my diploma on the passenger seat and whispered the same words I had repeated to myself for years. It's fine. It's just how things are. A few days after that Sunday dinner, I was at work when my phone started ringing. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer before it stopped. A woman introduced herself politely and asked if she was speaking with Delaney Hutchins. I said yes. She thanked me for confirming my identity and explained that she was calling about an overdue personal loan. At first, I thought she had reached the wrong person. I think there's been a mistake, I said. I don't have a personal loan. She paused for a moment and asked me to confirm my date of birth. I did. Then she asked for the last 4 digits of my social security number. I hesitated before giving them to her. Everything matched. She continued speaking in the same calm voice, explaining that several payments had been missed and the account had been sent to collections. None of it made any sense. I told her I had never borrowed that kind of money. She didn't argue with me. Instead, she asked if I still lived at an address I hadn't used in years. It was my parents' house. My stomach tightened. I had changed my address a long time ago after moving into my own apartment. There was no reason any new loan should be connected to that house. I asked her where the application had been submitted. She said she couldn't discuss every detail over the phone but could send copies of the documents if I believed the account was fraudulent. I thanked her, wrote down the claim number, and ended the call. For several minutes, I simply sat at my desk without moving. I wasn't scared yet. I was confused. I kept thinking there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe someone had entered the wrong information. Maybe another person with the same name had been mixed into the system. After work, I went straight home instead of stopping for groceries like I had planned. I opened my laptop and checked my credit report. The loan was there. It had been opened 18 months earlier. I looked through every page carefully, hoping I would find something that proved it belonged to someone else. Instead, every detail pointed back to me. The amount made my heart sink. $150,000. I searched through my own records. My bank statements, tax papers, and emails showed nothing about any loan. I had never received the money. I had never signed anything. The next morning, an email arrived with copies of the application. I printed every page and spread them across my kitchen table. My full name was written on the forms. My date of birth was correct. The old address at my parents' house appeared exactly as I remembered it. Then I reached the last page. There was a signature beside my name. I stared at it for a long time. It looked close enough that someone who didn't know me might believe it was real. But I knew every letter of my own handwriting. I knew the way I crossed my T and curved my D. That signature wasn't mine. Someone had signed my name. For the first time, I stopped wondering if this was a mistake. It wasn't. Someone had done this on purpose. I looked at my phone for almost an hour before I finally picked it up. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. If I called Bennett first, he would probably deny everything. My mother had always been easier to talk to. I told myself there had to be an explanation that I hadn't considered. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi, sweetheart," she said warmly. "Everything okay?" "Mom, I need to ask you something." "Of course. I got a call from a collections agency yesterday." There was a short silence. "They said there's a loan under my name." She didn't answer right away. "Mom? I'm sure it's some kind of mistake." I thought that too. Then they sent me the paperwork. "What paperwork?" "The loan documents." Another pause. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't speak. "The address on the application is your house," I said quietly. "The house I moved out of years ago." She let out a slow sigh. "Oh." That single word made my stomach twist. "You knew about this?" I asked. I know Bennett had some financial problems." "What does that have to do with my name?" "It isn't as simple as you're making it sound." "Then explain it." She hesitated again. "Your father tried to help." "Help who?" "Your brother." My grip tightened around the phone. "Mom, someone forged my signature." "I don't know all the details." "But you knew there was a problem." "We didn't want to worry you." I stood up and started walking around my apartment. "So everyone knew except me?" "Delaney, please don't get upset." "How can I not be upset? Your father believed everything would be fixed before you ever found out." I stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "He thought Bennett would pay it back." "When?" "I don't know." "How long have you known?" "I can't remember exactly." "You can't remember?" It all happened so fast. Nothing about her answers felt natural anymore. Every sentence sounded carefully chosen, as if she had already practiced saying it. "Mom, when did Dad find out?" "I'm not sure." "But you just said he handled it." He tried to." "Tried to do what?" "Keep everything under control." I closed my eyes. "Control what?" "The situation." "What situation?" She didn't answer. I felt like I was pulling on a loose thread that everyone else had been trying to hide. "Did Dad talk to the bank?" "I don't know." "Did he sign anything?" "I wasn't involved." "But you knew enough to say he handled it." She sighed again. "Delaney, please. This has already caused enough stress." "No, it hasn't. I didn't even know it existed until yesterday." She lowered her voice. "Bennett made some bad choices. Bad choices don't put my name on loan papers." "I know." "Do you?" "I do." "Then why didn't anyone tell me?" "We were trying to protect the family." I almost laughed, but nothing about the moment was funny. "The family? Please don't make this bigger than it needs to be." I felt something inside me grow very still. I looked at the papers spread across my kitchen table before asking the only question that mattered. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Did you know he used my name?" The line went completely silent. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She didn't answer at all. After my mother stopped speaking, I ended the call without saying goodbye. The apartment felt strangely quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the rain tapping against the window, but my mind refused to settle. I wanted to be angry. Instead, I just felt tired. That night, sleep never came. I opened the closet in my bedroom and pulled out a few old storage boxes I had carried with me every time I moved. I hadn't looked inside them for years. The first box held ordinary things. School notebooks, old concert tickets, birthday candles that had never been used, and a few letters from friends I had lost touch with. I moved everything aside slowly, almost as if I were searching for an answer hidden between the papers. Near the bottom was a birthday card from Bennett. I opened it. His handwriting was messy, just like I remembered. He had written that he hoped I always knew he would be there if I ever needed him. I read the sentence 3 times before closing the card again. For a moment, I tried to remember the brother who had written those words instead of the man whose name now filled my thoughts. Then I found an old photograph. Bennett and I couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. We were sitting there smiling so hard our eyes were almost closed. I stared at that picture for a long time. I wondered when everything had changed. Or maybe it hadn't changed at all. Maybe I had only been too young to notice. The next morning, I called the only person outside my immediate family who might tell me the truth. My Aunt Patricia answered after a few rings. She was my father's older sister. She had never completely disappeared from the family, but she wasn't really part of it either. Holiday visits became rare over the years, and nobody ever explained why. She listened without interrupting while I told her about the loan, the phone call, and my conversation with Mom. When I finished, she stayed quiet for several seconds. Finally, she said, "I was afraid something like this would happen one day." My heart sank. "You knew?" "I didn't know this," she replied. "But I know Bennett." I leaned back in my chair. "What do you mean?" She chose her words carefully. "This isn't the first time he's taken something that didn't belong to him." I frowned. "What has he done before?" "Nothing this serious. Small things over the years. Money borrowed and never returned. Papers signed by someone else. Promises made without permission." I felt cold. "And everyone just let it go?" "Most of the time." "Why?" "Because fixing the problem always seemed easier than making him face it." I looked out the window at the empty parking lot below. "I don't even know what to think anymore." "You don't have to decide today," Patricia said gently. "But you do need to be careful." "Careful of Bennett?" She paused. "No." "Then who?" Her answer came so softly that I almost missed it. "Your parents will choose him again, Delaney." Another long silence filled the call. Then she added the words I couldn't stop hearing long after we hung up. "They always have." 2 days later, I drove back to my parents' house. I didn't tell them why I wanted to meet. I only said we needed to talk face to face. My father agreed without asking many questions. When I arrived, my mother had already set the dinner table. The smell of fresh food filled the house, but nobody looked hungry. For a few minutes, we sat in silence. Finally, I placed the loan papers on the table. "I want the truth." My father looked at the papers but didn't touch them. I thought this was over. "It hasn't even started." He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "You're making this into something bigger than it is." I looked at him. "Someone stole my identity." "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." He rubbed his forehead. "Bennett got himself into a difficult situation. I know that part. He thought he could fix it. With my name?" He wasn't thinking clearly. I waited for him to say he was sorry. He never did. Instead, he looked annoyed that we were having the conversation at all. "It was a misunderstanding that got out of hand," he said. I stared at him. "A misunderstanding doesn't create fake signatures." My mother reached for my hand across the table. "Please don't fight." I pulled my hand away. "I'm not fighting. I'm asking questions." She lowered her eyes. "We've all been under so much pressure." "I've been under pressure too, Mom. I just didn't know why until now." Tears filled her eyes. "We were trying to protect everyone. Everyone except me." "That's not fair." "No?" She shook her head. "We never wanted you to get hurt." I looked down at the papers. "I already did." The room became quiet again. For one brief moment, I thought they finally understood. My father sighed deeply. "We'll figure something out." "What does that mean?" "We'll help Bennett pay it back." I looked at him in disbelief. "So that's your solution?" "What else do you want?" "I want someone to admit what happened. We know mistakes were made." "Mistakes?" "No one planned for this." I felt my patience slipping away. "He used my name. He made a bad decision. He committed fraud." My father suddenly raised his voice. "Enough." I met his eyes without looking away. "No." He stood up from his chair and paced across the room before turning back toward me. You've always been practical, Delaney. Think about this. I am thinking. If you report this, you'll ruin your brother's life. He ruined mine. That's not true. It already is. My mother started crying quietly. Please, she whispered. There has to be another way. There was, I answered. He could have asked for help instead of stealing from me. Neither of them spoke. Then my father said the words that changed everything. He's still your brother. I waited. He looked directly at me. Family doesn't press charges. The sentence hung in the air. I looked from my father to my mother. She didn't argue with him. She didn't tell him he was wrong. She simply sat there, crying into a napkin. In that moment, I understood something I had been trying not to believe. They weren't covering up a terrible mistake while searching for the right answer. They had already chosen their answer long before I walked through the front door. The only person they expected to sacrifice anything was me. I left my parents' house with more questions than answers. For several days, I kept replaying every word from that dinner in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more one thing bothered me. They had acted too calm. None of them had looked surprised. It was as if they had already lived through the hardest part before I ever knew there was a problem. A week later, my Aunt Patricia called me. I've been thinking about our conversation, she said. There's something you should know. I stayed quiet and let her continue. A friend of mine saw your parents, Bennett, and Bennett's fiancé having dinner together about a month ago. I frowned. So? It wasn't a family dinner. They were arguing. My heart started beating faster. How do you know? My friend recognized your father. They weren't trying to hide the conversation. People nearby could hear pieces of it. I listened without saying a word. Your father kept talking about Bennett's engagement. He said nothing could happen that would embarrass the family before the wedding. I closed my eyes. What else? Your mother was worried about what everyone would think if the truth came out. She kept saying they had to keep everything quiet. I leaned against the kitchen counter. And Bennett? Patricia let out a tired sigh. He didn't sound sorry. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He said he'd pay the money back eventually. He acted like time would solve everything. I looked out the window, watching people walk past my apartment building as if the world were completely normal. So they already knew. Yes. They knew before anyone contacted me. I believe they did. The silence between us lasted several seconds. Everything suddenly made sense. The careful answers. The missing explanations. The way my father had called it a misunderstanding. None of it had been spontaneous. They had already talked about what they were going to say. They hadn't been caught off guard. They had prepared. Before we ended the call, Patricia reminded me of something else. Check your messages from a few weeks ago. After we hung up, I opened my phone and scrolled back. There it was. A short text from my father that had seemed strange at the time. Can you hold off on making a big deal out of things for a little while? We'll explain soon. When I first read it, I thought he was talking about another one of Bennett's usual problems. Now I knew the truth. He wasn't trying to warn me. He was trying to buy time. The day after I found my father's message, I called Bennett. He answered with his usual confidence. I figured you'd call eventually. I want to see you. An hour later, we met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between our homes. He walked in wearing an expensive jacket, smiling as though we were meeting to catch up after a long time apart. He sat down across from me. So, he said, how are you holding up? I looked at him in disbelief. Is that really what you want to ask me? He shrugged. I know you're upset. You stole my identity. I borrowed your name. They're not the same thing. He leaned back in his chair. I was going to fix it. When? I just needed more time. You had 18 months. He looked away for a second before speaking again. You've always had good credit. It made everything easier. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think that's a reason? I trusted you. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You trusted me? Come on, Delaney. I knew you'd understand eventually. I stared at him. You don't even hear yourself. He sighed as if I were the difficult one. I don't know why you're acting like I robbed a stranger. You robbed your sister. He didn't answer. For years, I had kept my feelings to myself because speaking up never changed anything. This time, I wasn't staying quiet. I spent my whole life cleaning up after you, I said. Not because anyone asked me to, but because everyone expected me to. He frowned. What are you talking about? You made mistakes. I stayed responsible. You got help. I figured things out alone. You're exaggerating. No. I shook my head slowly. I finally understand what was happening. He folded his arms. And what's that? Your mistakes were never accidents to this family. He looked confused. They expected them. His face hardened. You always wanted to be the victim. I stood up. No, Bennett. I wanted to be your sister. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Don't do anything stupid, he said. I picked up my bag. I'm going to the bank. He stood up quickly. Delaney. Then I'm meeting with a lawyer. His expression changed. You wouldn't really do that. I looked at him calmly. I already decided. He opened his mouth to argue again, but I stopped him. This is the last conversation we'll ever have as family. Then I turned around and walked out without looking back. The next morning, I walked into the bank carrying a folder filled with every document I had collected. The employee listened carefully while I explained what had happened. She asked a few questions, made copies of my papers, and gave me forms to complete. She spoke kindly, but every sentence made the situation feel more real. I sat at a small desk with a pen in my hand. The report was only a few pages long. It should have been easy to sign. Instead, I stared at the blank line for several minutes. Once my name went on that paper, there would be no turning back. My phone started ringing. It was my mother. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, my father called. Then another call came. Then another. I stepped outside before answering. Dad spoke first. Don't do this. I have to. No, you don't. There isn't another choice. His voice grew sharper. If you report Bennett, everyone will know. I didn't create this. You'll destroy this family. I looked across the parking lot. It was already broken. He became quiet. Then my mother took the phone. She was crying. The engagement party is this weekend. I didn't answer. Please wait until after it's over. So everyone can pretend nothing happened? We just need a little more time. I've heard that before. She kept begging. She said people would ask questions. She said Bennett's future would be ruined. She said relatives would stop speaking to us. Not once did she ask how I was doing. When the call ended, I went back inside. Before signing the papers, I opened my wallet. Behind my driver's license was a small family picture I had carried for years. It showed all four of us standing together during a summer vacation. We looked happy. I wondered how many smiles in that picture were real and how many existed because I hadn't learned the truth yet. For a moment, my hand started to shake. This wasn't only about money. It meant letting go of the family I had spent my whole life trying to protect. I took a deep breath. Then I signed every page. The employee collected the forms and thanked me. As I walked back to my car, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. 2 days later, Bennett's engagement party began. My phone filled with missed calls and messages from both of my parents. I didn't read any of them. I turned my phone off, placed it on the kitchen counter, and sat quietly by the window as the evening grew dark. For the first time in days, there were no voices asking me to carry someone else's burden. There was only silence. And I chose to keep it. Months passed. Life slowly settled into a routine again. I went to work every morning, came home to my apartment every evening, and stopped checking my phone every few minutes. The silence that once felt strange had become something I valued. The legal process moved forward one step at a time. I answered questions when I had to and signed documents when they were needed. The rest of the time, I focused on building a life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. One afternoon, my phone rang. Bennett. I stared at his name for a long moment before answering. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't apologize. He got straight to the point. My engagement is over. I stayed quiet. They found out about everything. I still said nothing. After a few seconds, he spoke again. Can't you just let the case go? His voice sounded tired, but not sorry. It doesn't have to end like this. I looked around my apartment. The afternoon sunlight filled the room through the windows. A small plant sat on the shelf beside my books. There was a cup of coffee on the table that had already gone cold. Everything around me felt calm. Bennett, I said, it already ended. You know what I mean. No. You can stop this. I didn't start it. He sighed. I've lost everything. I thought about those words. Months earlier, hearing them might have filled me with guilt. Now they only reminded me of the day I realized nobody in my family had asked what I had lost. You want me to save you again, I said quietly. I just want you to let it go. I smiled sadly. I already did. He sounded confused. What are you talking about? I let go of waiting for you to take responsibility. He didn't answer. I let go of hoping Mom and Dad would finally see things differently. The line stayed silent. And I let go of needing any of you to choose me. After that, there was nothing left to say. I wished him well. Then I ended the call. I never heard from him again. That evening, I stood by my living room window and watched the lights come on across the neighborhood. It was the same apartment where this chapter of my life had begun. The furniture was still simple. The walls were still plain, but something inside me had changed. When I first moved here, I carried fear, confusion, and the hope that my family would somehow become different. Now those feelings were gone. People told me walking away meant losing everything. They were wrong. Walking away wasn't the day I lost my family. It was the day I finally stopped losing myself.